So I want to welcome everyone to the Duneland Exchange Club. I am Lorelei Weimer, the president, and tonight we have Teresa here, who is let me give a sorry, Teresa. Teresa is the family case manager for the Lake County Department of Child Services. She has been with them for 12 years in this capacity. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology, and prior to being in the role she currently is, she was a legal secretary for the same department for 5 years. And so Teresa is going to talk to us a little bit about what she's doing and giving us a little bit more in depth look at what she does on a day-to-day basis and maybe information that people don't know. One of the things that I found, Teresa, on the website for the state is that, it's really important that if you suspect that a child is being neglected or abused, to call the state hotline, and it is anonymous. And I think that is really critical for people to know. I think sometimes people don't want to get involved because they're concerned that they're going to be identified as to the person that they actually call, that they're the ones that called in. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Teresa. What we'll plan on doing, Teresa, is let you give us the overview and give us the information that you think is really critical for all of us to know. And then just we'd like to have some time for question and answers. So we are recording this because there are members that would have liked to have been here, and we're finding out that there's quite a few of our members that work on Thursday night that can't attend, but are still very interested in the topics that we're talking about. So we record this so they have an opportunity to see this. We also have a website that we normally put these recordings on. So our goal is as much of education that we can get on the topic of prevention of child abuse that is beneficial to the community. We want to make sure we can push that out. So Teresa, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And again, welcome and thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. It's always nice. I enjoy actually doing my job and talking about it to educate people on what actually Department of Child Services is, because there is such a disconnect of interpretation of what people believe child services actually does. So just to give you a little bit of background, every county has their own local office that works throughout that whole entire county. I do work in Lake County, and I've always worked in Lake County. I have not worked in any other county in the state of Indiana. When you are hired, you do go through an interview process. You do go through a rigorous training that gives you a lot of background information, policy information, some state laws, regulations, before they actually put you into the field. When you get into the field, at that time, you do follow somebody to explain to you the whole process of what you are doing. So there is an extensive part of training that does go along with the job. Each county does have an assessment and a permanency division. Some of them are the same workers. Some workers do both assessment and permanency. Permanency is the ongoing casework services when a family becomes involved with Department of Child Services. The assessment part is the part once a call is called into the hotline, that is assigned to a worker in that specific county to go out and actually investigate whether the allegations are true or not. So what that looks like is we get whatever the report is called in from the hotline that gives us some information regarding the family. Sometimes we don't have a lot of information to go on. It could be, a neighbor that just knows, this is a little, suspicious of what's going on. I really don't know the names of the kids. I don't know, but this is the house. So we kind of have to go off of that. We go out, we talk to the children, we talk to the families. Sometimes we talk to the schools to kind of find out what is going on with the family. At that time, once that assessment worker has found all of the information that we seem to be able to find, we take that information and it is presented to our legal department. Our legal department then submits all of that information to the court. We go in front of the judge, present all of the information. The parents have at that time to state whether that information is true or not true. And at that time, the judge makes a decision on whether or not they're going to um, take the case in and make the children a temporary ward of the state of Indiana. Once that has happened, there's a transition from the assessment worker to the permanency worker. That is the worker who will carry on the case, usually throughout the life of the case. At that time, we look at what the family's needs are, what they have become involved into the system. At that, we make referrals to providers to work with the families. We work with a wide variety of different providers. Those providers can supply information for or assistance for individual therapy, family therapy, domestic violence therapy, substance abuse therapy. Um, there's home-based casework services, which will help the families locate if they need to locate housing, employment, trying to even if parents want to go back to school, get their GED, driver's license, a wide variety of things that the home-based caseworker can help with. And then we offer tutoring services to the family if we've gotten involved because of educational neglect, that the child's not attending school regularly, failing the classes. We can put a tutor in place to assist with helping get the child at the grade level that they need to be with their schoolwork. There's a wide variety of services that we offer. More recently, we started offering what is called family preservation, and it's kind of an intense service that we put in with the family to keep the children in the home. So with Department of Child Services, they continuously review how many kids are in the home, how many kids are in foster care, how many kids are in relative placements, anything like that. So they constantly review all of that, take all of that, and kind of build from that to find out what we need to really work on. So they recently did family preservation, which encourages us to keep the children in the home instead of having to remove the children from the home, which is awesome because then you're not breaking up the family and possibly causing some traumatic things going on with the children, with the parents, being split apart, a kid going into a foster home that they don't know who they're going to be with, what, where they're going to sleep, what they're going to eat, or anything like that. So family preservation does where the kids can remain in the home. We put in all of the services. It's very intense. Somebody's there working with the family, usually like 3 to 4 days a week. If they need it more, then they have somebody there more often. If they don't need it as intense, then we kind of backpedal to not have people in there as often. I would say all of our different services that we have in place, it kind of goes based on case to case situation, what the family actually needs. So at that point, once all those services are put in, we have meetings with the family, usually about every 3 months, with all of their service providers to discuss the case, to discuss how it's going, what do we need to work on, what do we need to change, anything like that. So we are very involved with the providers and the family, working on getting the children either back in the home or closing out the case. What else could I say? I will say there's a lot of community outreach that we do with locating different resources. A lot of times families need stoves, refrigerator, furniture, assistance with rent. They need to know what local resources for like where food pantries are. Some of these families do not have internet to be able to search to look for a lot of these resources. And it's weird, and it's a day and age that we're in now. They think everyone has internet, everyone has access to a phone, but it's not the case. You see a wide variety of people who do not have that access. Or I would say even the education to be able to search for that. Sometimes the cases that we have are generational. So they grew up in the system, now their kids are in the system. So they've learned that that's kind of the way of the life. So we try to educate them in locating the different resources in the community so that that way, they don't come back into the system. We really do not, we don't go out looking for families to get involved with, to remove children from. It all comes from the anonymous calls to the hotline. With the calls to the hotline, that is completely anonymous. You do not have to give any information at all regarding who you are, your relationship to the family, or a telephone number. I know that a lot of times they do ask that, is there a number that the worker can call you back on? At that point, some families do, some people who do call in the report will leave a telephone number. We never release that information. We never release any information on who called the report in, even if we do know who called the report in. That is confidential information. Even if the family came to request that information is always confidential. So that family would never know who called the report in. So it keeps everybody safe in those regards. So that hopefully, with that being anonymous, we can get the reports in for the cases that really need to be called in. We've had calls where people have called at the grocery store, that they've seen something at the grocery store and they've called in anonymously, and we've had to track down, Jane Smith that was at the grocery store because there was concerns for that. So even if you do not think that you have a lot of information, we do have ways to find out things to be able to hopefully identify the family that does need help. A lot of people think that the case manager has a lot of say regarding what goes on with the case. We do not. Everything that goes on with the case is staffed up regularly with upper management. We do go to court on a regular basis. I would say each county kind of does it a little bit differently on how often they go to court. I know in Lake County, we go about every 3 months. State law requires once every 6 months. So depending on the county, depending on how many families that they were working with, if there's enough judges to handle the caseload, kind of determines on how often the family does go in front of the judge to discuss the case. So like I said, and we staff with the families regularly to so that the families have a say-so on what goes on with the case. If the families are, wanting case closure, and we kind of staff with them, okay, well, how can we get to case closure? What do we need to work on? We've had families where we're involved and dad lives in another state, doesn't know anything that's been going on with his kids. Mom lives in another state, doesn't know what anything is going on. So we do locate the parent that may not be involved currently or know where their children currently are. So throughout the case, we do look for the other parent that may not have known or have been identified. We've had where parents have, the father's never been in the child's life. They know the name, but they don't know where the person is. So we do have where we can search to try to find that other parent so that way we can get them involved to find out how, if they need in service or if they need any services, how we can engage them to be a parent to their children. When we do go to look to remove children from their home, we do look at relative placement. So we ask the parents, do you have anybody who could take your kids? Whether it's, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles. And we even go as, do you have a close family friend who the kids have a relationship with that they can go with? We prefer to put the children in some type of relative placement versus putting them in a foster home. When they're placed in a relative placement, it makes things sometimes tricky, but the children are familiar with that person. So it makes the child a lot more comfortable being in an environment that they are familiar with versus being in a foster home where they have no clue what rules are, where they're going to sleep that night. And, if they're scared of the dark, are they going to have a night light? Are they, where are they going to eat? What if they don't have the right cereal that they like? So we do try to look for relatives that can take the kids. Now, if no relative is identified at the time that removal is done, throughout the time that the case manager does have the case, we actively search for relatives. With that, we definitely try to find relatives, because also with that is some cases end up in termination of parental rights. Parents are given a certain time frame to try to get their life together, and if they don't, we proceed to termination of parental rights. So state law states if a child is out of the home 15 months out of 18, then we file for termination of parental rights. That does not mean that services stop for the family. We still engage the family. So through that whole time that termination has gone through, they go through a trial, and the judge makes a decision whether or not the parents are going to get it together to be able to get their kids back. So at that time, that's why another reason we really look for relatives is because if something does happen and the parents can't get it together, our hope is that eventually they do, and we can get, the aunt and uncle to do guardianship for the child, so that child will live with them. And it's still under a court order that there's guardianship, that they don't go back to the parents, to give that parent still additional time to get it together. So for us, it's very crucial that we look for relatives throughout the case to place the children in care with. There is for the termination of parental rights, that is for Lake County, we have a separate judge who he has no information. We go in, and the parents present their case, and then DCS presents their case. And then we also have a CASA, which CASA is a court appointed special advocate. And every child that comes into DCS is assigned a CASA. That CASA is an advocate for that child on what is in the best interest of that child. DCS works more as a family on trying to provide the whole family services, and CASA just focuses on the child. We do work together and collaborate a lot regarding the family. So at the termination hearing, everyone presents their case, gives all of the evidence that they do have, and then the judge reviews all of the evidence that has been presented. So it's really a trial. However, there is no jury, it's the judge, and the judge makes that final decision on whether or not the rights for the parents are going to be terminated or not. If the rights for the parents are terminated, that means the children are now available for adoption. And at that time, we are usually where the children are placed in a home where those people are going to adopt the child or children that have been terminated, that their parents' rights have been terminated. And then after that point, we would proceed to the adoption process. And that process can be also very lengthy. Parents do have the right to appeal any decision by the court. So even after the termination has been granted, parents have time to appeal that process. So while that process is going on, if the parents do appeal it, those children cannot be adopted until that process has been completed by the appellate court. At that point, I've not seen it, but parents can technically appeal what the appellate court has done, and it can go up the chain. That I've not seen that, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. That is always a possibility that can happen. And then we move forward, like I said, with the adoption process. There's an extensive amount of work that goes into the adoption process, for all kinds of background checks, things of that nature, of making sure that that's, the best fit home for the child to stay in. So that is a lengthy process. For our foster parents that do want to foster or relative placements, there is a process that they have to go through. All of our foster parents do have to participate in a continuing education. So before they are able to become foster parents, they do have to take a series of classes to become a licensed foster parent. After that happens, they have to continuously take the continuing education yearly to maintain being a foster parent. For relatives, they do not have to, if you do not want to become a licensed foster parent, they do not have to take that education, but they do have to go through background checks. So everyone goes through criminal background checks, fingerprinting, and they go through a CPS check to make sure that there has not been any allegations regarding abuse or neglect from that person who is applying to be a relative placement or the foster care placement. During the history of the case, those are updated frequently to make sure that those foster parents or relatives, that nothing new came up, that there hasn't been any new charges. There have been incidences, I would say, some people think that they can't be a relative placement because when they were 18, they wrote a bad check and now they got a felony on their record. A lot of times what we can do is, depending on what the situation is, there is a background check unit that does kind of go through that process and works with the family to see if that's something that we can still authorize placement with the relatives, even though that had occurred. So there's a lot of involvement that goes on behind the scenes with working with all of the different people who are working with the Department of Child Services, and trying to make sure that all of those pieces connect and fit together during that whole process. Sometimes you will work with somebody that you may not always agree with, you may butt heads with, but it's trying to figure out how to come to that common ground of working together to get that outcome that's best for that child and family. But I think I tried to give like a generalization of everything. Is there any questions?
I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to open. So I'm going to start. I'll start with the first one, and then I'm going to open it up for others as well. So how big is your caseload in terms of how many cases do you have usually on average?
So I would say on average, they're keeping us about 15 to 17 kids. That doesn't necessarily mean cases. Depending on the size of the family. So if I have, 3 cases and each case has 5 kids, then I would only have 3 cases, but I would still have 15 kids on my caseload.
Okay. And then when you look at your county, what would you say would be there's I think you guys are tracking neglect, physical, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and then human trafficking. What would you say is the highest percentage of the issues that you guys are dealing with out of those four categories?
I would say neglect is probably the highest because neglect kind of covers a large range where sex abuse is more specific along with human trafficking is more specific. So we most of our cases are, I would say, would be more neglect because it's a wider range of what type of cases would fall under that category.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up because, like I said, I have others, but I want to open it up to other people that are on the phone. So, or on in the meeting. So, does anybody else have questions? And everybody is muted, so you will have to unmute.
I have
So,
a question.
Jackie, yeah. So I saw Jackie unmute first. Go ahead, Jackie.
You referenced an anonymous phone number for people to make their reporting. Is that just for Lake County? Is there like a one for Lake County and a separate one for Porter County, or is it like a nationwide or statewide number?
No, so it is a statewide number. Everything goes through the one hotline, and then those calls then are sent to the county that the where it needs to be investigated. So
And what is that number?
that number is 1-800-800-5556.
It's pretty easy.
800-800-5556.
Yes.
That's the anonymous tip line. Okay.
Yes.
And I was amazed, Teresa, because obviously I don't go there that often, but I did go to the website for the state, and it's got a lot of great information about the resources. So I was very impressed with the website. In fact, because of what I've seen, I'm going to make sure that we have that on our website, that at least we point people to that in terms of trying to get more information. Jackie, did you have another question before I go on to Mac?
I have one other quick question. Just, are you seeing during this last almost a year now that we've been in this COVID world, have you seen any difference in reportings or, better or worse?
Yes, so we have seen a decrease in reportings, and I believe that has come from a lot of schools are not in session. Teachers, any school employee is a mandated reporter. So if they see something suspicious, they are mandated to report it, along with any hospitals, medical personnel, anything of that nature, social workers, psychologists, anything of that nature are mandated to report it. So with the children not going to friend's house to go play with their friends or going to school, it kind of has hindered on anybody knowing what's going on in the homes.
Wow, that's not good. You don't think about that,
I thought you would say that they've been up because people are more frustrated and at home, but I get it. They're not, just the reportings aren't happening. So,
Right.
So that could be happening, Jackie, it's just that nobody knows about it.
right. That's
Right.
Okay,
Matt,
thank you.
You had a question, it looked like, or you unmuted?
Yeah. Thank you for doing this today. This is really great. At Ball State University, they have guardian scholars for those students that have aged out of the foster program. And is there any follow-up that goes on beyond, 18?
Yes, so there is. And the last few years, they have really been working on this. So for the children that do age out of the system, we kind of staff that regularly if that's what it's looking like. So our youth 16 and older can enter into a program called collaborative care that is under the umbrella of Department of Child Services. So those are children who are going to age out of the system. They're not going to be reunified with their parents for whatever reason that may be. So with that, they have, when they go to collaborative care, they are given a worker to work on independent living skills, work on budgeting. If they want to go to college, working on that whole process of doing scheduling for SATs, ACTs, applying for scholarships, anything of that nature. Indiana, I will say, has a phenomenal program for the children who have aged out of the system for them to continue on for college. All of the state schools, except that we have 21st Century Scholars, which is applied for while they are part in the system. And most of the time, if they age out of the system, they're pretty much, I can't say guaranteed that scholarship, but most of the time they are given that scholarship. However, there are some things that they do have to maintain and have to do in order to earn that scholarship, regarding like grade point averages, doing community service, things of that nature. There's also another program called ETV that they can apply for to get assistance for additional scholarships to go to school. They now just raised the age, I believe, to 26 for children who have aged out of the system. So after they turn 18, the child can make the decision on whether or not they want to continue to be part of the collaborative care program, or they, want to close out their case and be done with DCS. However, if they leave on that notion that they, really do not want to participate at any time after that, they can call back and do voluntary services, which I think is awesome because, kids at 18 think that they know everything and they can take care of themselves and they don't want to follow the rules of where they're at. And they go out and realize, you know what, life is just not as what I thought it was. So they can pick up that phone anywhere in the state of Indiana and tell them, well, actually anywhere in the country, they can pick up that phone and call the hotline for Indiana and tell them that they want to participate into the voluntary collaborative care program, and they would be assigned a worker that would work with them at that point to help them. So there's different plans that go with it. Not every kid's plan is the same. When they reach 18, not every kid has to go to college. Some kids we set up with doing trade schools, things of that nature. If they just want to go into the work field, they can also do that.
Thank you.
So Teresa, if somebody ages out and they're not going to be staying with their family, what do you do? They're not, they're not really equipped to have a job, or the job's not going to pay a lot, and they really don't have the wherewithal to be on their own. What do you do in that situation where they just want to be done with the parents, but yet they don't have the ability to live on their own?
So the only time that they can participate in the collaborative care program when they age out of the system is when they are not placed with the parents. So they would be in some type of either relative placement or foster care. And even some incidents, I would say even residential facilities. And at that time, we kind of look at, have that conversation with the kid. What do you want to do? Do you, things open up a little bit more, we can consider places as a host home. So somebody who would state that maybe, it is somebody that he met at school and, he wants to live with that person. So it's kind of creating what's going to work best for that family or that kid to put them up. So there have been incidences where they have helped with locating an apartment, helping with the deposit, because, for kids, when they're just starting off, they may not have had the capability of saving up enough money for a deposit on an apartment or anything of that nature. So there are a few different options. But if they do help with the rent or the deposit, there is a process that has to go through that. They have to be able to show that they're going to be working and be able to maintain that rent moving forward.
Any other questions? Because I have a Marcia, yes. And you're on mute, Marcia.
Good evening. So I'm working on an article about this for one of the local newspapers. And, oh, am I frozen?
No, you're not. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. And I was wondering if Teresa could spell her first name for me.
It's Theresa, and it's Abell.
Very good.
And Teresa is frozen, so she just joined back in. Let's see
Oh,
if they.
okay.
There you go. Can you see us, Teresa? I mean, can you hear us, Teresa? Let's see. Let's get her back off of mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Ah,
Okay.
yes. Although
Sorry,
you're
my-
sideways.
you're sideways, but
I'm sorry. Here,
there you
we'll
go.
turn- I'm like, I always have a backup in case something goes wrong.
Well, it's funny because Marcia goes, Marcia thought she had frozen, but actually you had frozen. So that worked out fine. Thanks for jumping back on. So
No,
Marcia, you had a second question?
I did. What? So I'm working on this for an article for our one of our local newspapers, and I was
Okay.
wondering what can people look for? How do they know that they are seeing abuse? Because no one walks around with a sign saying "I am abused."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right. You know what? There's not really anything specific that you can really look for that would make that determination, because there may be the kid may have a mark on their body, but it may have been that they legit just fell. So there's really nothing like specific that I could say that you can look for, but if you're suspicious of anything, report it. I would say if it just in your gut, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right, report it and let the professionals go out and make that assessment to determine on if they feel that intervention is needed, because ultimately nobody knows what's going on in that home except for the family.
Thank you.
Teresa, have you ever had a situation where the court does want to leave the children with the parents and the children really don't want to go back to the parents? I mean, have you had those situations where they just really don't want to be with the parents, and what do they do under those circumstances?
So there have been cases that maybe they want to be with one parent and not the other parent. It depends on really, I would say it would be a case by case specific thing. If a kid is not wanting to go back home, the judge is going to want to know what's going on, because most kids, even if you get involved with a family because maybe the house is deplorable and doesn't have running water, but that's how the kid has grown up, they're used to it, they still want to go home with their mom and dad, they don't know any different. So the judge is really going to want to know why the kid doesn't want to go home with that parent.
Okay. What would you say, would you have an idea of what the percentage of false reports are where somebody did think it was neglect or they did think it was abuse, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't based on your assessment? I mean, is that a high percentage? I mean, do you have a feel for that?
No, not at all.
Okay. I'm just looking over my questions real quick. And what would you say with what's going on in the household? What is driving a lot of the situations that are taking place where kids are being neglected? I mean, is it drugs? I mean, is there something in particular that are happening with the parents that are leading to the abuse, the neglect, that's taking place?
I mean, there are a lot of cases where drugs seems to be the leading factor. However, usually when you get involved with a family and drugs have been involved, there's other underlying things that are going on with the family. So it may seem that it has been drug related. However, there's a lot more intense things that could possibly be going on with the family. We do see educational neglect for both parents work, so they got to get out the house before the kid has to leave for school, and sometimes that kid just doesn't leave for school.
Mm.
decides to stay at home. So it's a wide range on what type of cases you see for neglect. I would say, definitely neglect is one of the higher ones, but we've gone from, even medical neglect that, say a child has an illness that needs to be treated and the parent's not following through. The doctors would call in and report that is something, the parents aren't following through on treatment or anything like that. And, we would get involved to try to help the family to figure out what they need to work on.
Teresa, I have just one last question, and then we'll
Mhm.
ask everybody for a final question if they have one. What surprised you the most when you got into this field that you were just not expecting?
I'm not really sure. I want to say it would probably be the sex abuse on that, how many times other family members knew what was going on and nobody reported it.
Mm.
I think that would be more of probably one that would surprise me the most, is that, the aunt and uncle may have known that grandfather was, molesting the child, but nobody called to report it.
Mm. I just heard a story about that yesterday, where the sister didn't want her sister's husband was sexually abusing a child, and she didn't want to lose that relationship with her sister.
Yeah.
And so she told her child, "We're not going to say anything."
Yeah. No, that happens quite frequent.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, Teresa, thank you so much. Before I let you go, though, I do want to make sure that if anybody else has a question, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to answer or ask a question. So is there any other questions?
Oh,
Okay.
I do have one.
Okay.
And after doing this for a whole year, I'm still fooling around with the mute button.
We all are.
Yes.
So, Theresa, I was wondering, when it comes to sexual abuse, if you suspect something and you report it, does the person who well, any type of abuse, in fact, does the person who reported ever get, say, report back saying, okay, this is what was actually happening? Is there ever any follow through? Or does it just...
No, there is not, because it's confidential. So any family that we do work with, any of that information regarding the family is confidential. We can't release that information to state that, we did go out to the home and, they were being abused or they were being sexually molested or, anything like that. We can't go back to report that because that is confidential information.
Okay.
Well, if there's no other questions, first of all, Teresa, again, I want to thank you for taking time to speak to us. Also, a huge thank you for what you do. A lot of people could not do the job that you do on a day-to-day basis, and you've been at it for 12 years, and that's a huge commitment. And so thank you for doing this, because, if it wasn't for your agency and everybody that's working for your agency, we wouldn't be able to move the kids forward and help the families become better parents and so forth. So thank you for everything that you do. And so we will, that will be it. So thank you guys all for being here. Again, a big thank you to Teresa. And then we will be regathering again in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right.
Thanks,
thank
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good
Yeah.
evening.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
You.